few factories in the world that still practices this ancient craft of wood mold making. Now we generally make wooden molds only for our once-off pieces, like our specially commissioned pieces and our trophy. Of course, for regular production pieces we would use cast iron molds. You'll see some examples of them there just on the left-hand side, but you'll get to see them in action in a few moments when we move up onto the gluing platform. Now, we also make our own wooden tools on site here, such as blocks and dividers. There's some on display here in the window, but again, you'll see them in use in a few moments. The types of wood we use are beech wood and pear wood, and we use these woods because of their hardness and ability to absorb water. Of course, the heat from the crystal is so intense that the molds and tools will only withstand being used for between 7 and 10 days. Okay? Now, if you'd like to follow me this way, shortly we'll take a look at our blowing platform. Here from the annealing oven, it will look something like this one here. This vase piece still has the extra piece of crystal on the top. Now you might have noticed back in the blowing room that was the extra piece of crystal sticking out at the top of the cast iron mold. That's known as a cap, and it simply kept the piece attached to the blowing iron while the piece was being blown. So now when it arrives here, of course, it's no longer needed. We remove it simply by scoring along the circumference of the piece while blasting it with, we score along the circumference of the piece using diamond-tipped wheels. while blasting it with jets of hot and cold air until the cap will simply crack off. So now the piece ends up looking like this one here, and it's at this stage that it's sent for its first quality inspection. Now we do operate a very stringent quality inspection system here at Waterford. We'll check each piece after every stage of production. That makes a total of 6 quality inspections. Now if at any stage a piece is deemed not to meet our required standards, well, that piece is simply smashed and the broken pieces are ground down into a fine powder. They're then remelted in the tank furnace. So while we don't mark it any seconds, at the same time we don't have any wastage. So now shortly we'll be moving on to the first of our cutting departments. When a piece arrives in the cutting department, it'll look something like this one here, except that it will have had horizontal and vertical lines drawn onto it. They're drawn on to create a grid that will act as a guide for the cutter to help him keep the pattern even along the piece. Of course, we never draw the actual design onto the piece of crystal, and this is because during their training, the cutters have to memorise over 100 different patterns by heart, and they draw strictly on memory when they're cutting the piece. Okay? So if you'd like to follow me this way, and I'll take you into the first cutting department. The wedge cut is the most common cut found in Waterford crystal. The deep crisscross pattern. So then we achieve this cut using these industrial diamond-tipped wheels, where the cutter is making an incision approximately 2/3 deep into the piece of crystal. Now, of course, because the crystal is hand-blown, it's impossible for each piece to be uniform in thickness. So the cutters here are relying on their own skill to judge how much pressure to apply in order to hold a piece of crystal to the wheel. Too much pressure and the wheel might cut right through the piece. Not enough pressure and the piece will be rejected by quality control and the cutter won't get paid for it. The last department was the wedge cut, which is a deep crisscross pattern here. The second type of cut we do at the factory is known as the flat cut. You can see it here. You'll generally find it on the necks of decanters and on the stems of drinking glasses. Okay? So now to look at, you might think that the flat cut here, they range in size from one the size of a pinhead to one the size of the palm of your hand. Of course, copper is quite a soft metal and it's not sharp enough to cut into the crystal. So this abrasive paste here has to be applied to the wheel. It's just made up of linseed oil and carborundum stone dust.